Hello and welcome to this special episode of the Harrison Podcast and the Presidencies of the United States. That's right, this episode will be available on both feeds. As we're coming up on the 1-year anniversary of my venturing into the world of podcasting, I wanted to do a special episode to first say thank you to all those out there who have been listening and to give you some information on where we're at and where we're going. I'll go ahead and get to the exciting part first. As part of the 1-year anniversary, I want to hear from you to get a sense of what I'm doing right and what I could be doing better. Thus, I've created a short survey that you can access through links posted on all of my social media, as well as at the blogs at either WHH Podcasts or Presidencies.blueberry, that's BLUBRRY.com. The survey can be submitted anonymously, but as an incentive and a thank you for participating, I'm offering all those who have listened to at least one episode and provide their email address an opportunity to win a $15 gift card to Powell's Books, the largest independent bookseller in the U.S. If you're in the Portland, Oregon area and haven't been, go, like right now. You can't miss it. The bookstore takes up a full city block. It's heavenly. But don't worry, if you're not in the Portland area, you can still order books from Powell's online. They provide great service and have always been a pleasure for me to deal with, and they haven't paid me a cent to say any of that. Though, if they would like to, please send the check my way. I also accept payment in books. Anyway, getting back to business. Those survey participants who provide their email address will be entered into a random drawing for the gift card. We're operating under the honor system, so please only submit one entry, and please have listened to at least one episode before responding. While the gift card is an incentive for you, the prize for me is your honest feedback so that I can improve this experience for all as we move forward. The survey will close on July 31st, and I'll do the drawing on August 1st, so get your response in ASAP. One thing that's been fascinating for me to watch in terms of the statistics behind the scenes is where episodes are being downloaded. So I'd like to take a moment to introduce you members of the audience to one another. The stats track by state as well as by country. I'm proud to say that both podcasts have been downloaded in all 6 permanently populated continents, though I'm still waiting for someone in Antarctica to download an episode to see how that looks. The Harrison Podcast has been downloaded in 30 states and territories, while Presidencies has been downloaded in 24. North Carolina takes the top spot with 21% of the downloads of Harrison, but drops down to a tie for 5th place with Virginia for Presidencies, with Texas supplanting it at the top in terms of downloads. NC folks, you better pick up your game. As would be expected, there's a strong Midwest listenership for Harrison, while the audience for Presidencies seems to be currently focused in the South. As would be expected, a majority of listeners to the Harrison Podcast and a plurality of listeners to Presidencies are from the U.S., but the 2nd and 3rd place for both are the same and are roughly equivalent for both podcasts. Thus, I would like to say konnichiwa arigato to our listeners from Japan, which accounts for just over 25% of our audience, and hallo und dankeschön to our listeners from Germany, who make up just around 10% of the audience. No matter where you're from, I'm glad you're here and that you found these podcasts. When I began podcasting a year ago, I didn't know what really to expect. I understood the basic mechanics, sure, but I knew there was so much more that I still had to learn, and I really didn't know if anyone would be willing to take time out to listen to me talk about an obscure president and subjects related to his life. Surprisingly, there were folks willing to listen. As of July 12th, there have been just over 2,400 unique downloads of episodes of the Harrison Podcast. The current average is 62 downloads per episode. That's modest numbers compared to other podcasts. I don't think the NPR podcasts have anything to worry about in terms of competition. But that means that 62 folks are willing to see what I have to say every couple of weeks when I put out another episode. And that's 62 more folks than were listening to me before I started podcasting. Moreover, I've been able to sustain those numbers over 30 plus episodes. Naturally, the older an episode is, the more downloads it typically has. But then there are certain outliers. For some reason, people were really interested in episode 27, which was about Harrison's struggles in the 1830s. Also, who knew Martin Van Buren, and Jacksonian finance would be that popular of subjects? Again, one of those many things I couldn't have known until I threw myself into it and gave it a go. Around the time of the election, an idea popped into my head of expanding my mission. While also wanting to continue to study and podcast about Old Tip, I know that the election had brought up in many friends' minds questions about the presidency, what it meant, the election process, how we got to where we're at, so on and so forth. As I got questions about this or that from people on all sides of the political spectrum and kept providing historical and governmental information to folks, I started thinking about doing a second podcast. This one focused on the presidencies of the United States. I knew this was an even bigger of a challenge that I was undertaking than when I had started the Harrison podcast. If I'm to see it through, then I'm going to have to go through the lives of 44 men and 45 presidencies. Thanks a lot, Grover Cleveland, for making it complicated. Some of these presidents I know better than others, but I at least know the basics on all and can build from there moving forward. Also, while I could devote an episode to each one, part of why it's called the presidencies of the United States is that, though there may only be one president at a time, the actual work is not done by just one person, nor are the results, for better or worse, solely attributable to any one person. It was important to me to be able to look at not just the president, but others, both in the administration and outside, who played key roles in the history of that president's term in office. For those who don't know me, I'm known as being rather of a Microsoft Excel nerd. I have Excel tables and charts for everything. So naturally, when I started thinking of the presidencies, I started plotting out how many episodes I'd need to properly cover Washington's presidency, then use formulas to try and plot out a schedule of deadlines for scripting, recording, editing, and finally launching. Since then, there have been adjustments. What was supposed to be a 16-episode series is now up to 20, and I may add another episode or two in before I'm done. The Harrison podcast is a bit looser, as the episodes don't have to depend on one another, but I have to think about how the episodes in the Presidencies podcast are sequenced. Sometimes connections between episodes in the long narrative are planned. Other times, like with the episode I was just working on, I start writing and realize that one subject relates to another. Then it brings us back to something mentioned a few episodes back. Then, oh yeah, there's also this that we discussed close to the beginning, and it all just works itself out naturally. I love when I can really shut off and focus on the writing process. It's like getting lost and found all at the same time. I've learned a great deal in this past year about podcasting, about history, and about myself. Undertaking this project, the positive response that I've gotten thus far, and the joy that I feel on working on each episode has given me a confidence that maybe I'm on something. I don't know where all this will ultimately lead me, but that's a problem for future Jerry. At this point, I'm just having too much fun being that history geek who gets to share his thoughts about presidents with folks. So what is coming next? Well, with the Harrison podcast, I'm working to wrap up the Henry Clay series of episodes. We've got him up to his tenure as Secretary of State, so we've still got a ways to go. I'd also like to take a look at lesser-known figures in Harrison's cabinet. Being from North Carolina, George Badger is naturally of interest to me, but Francis Granger is a little discussed but fascinating figure. He was actually Harrison's running mate in 1836, and indirectly helped cause the election for vice president to be decided that year in a way that it had not been before, nor has ever since. I'd also like to work on some episodes focusing back in on Harrison, including a discussion of Harrison's religious beliefs, his relationship with Andrew Jackson, and an episode focusing on Anna Sims Harrison. With presidencies, we're getting into Washington's second term, so there's a great deal of action to come. Citizens Genet, the Jay Treaty, Ona Judge, and the Edmund Randolph scandal, just to name a few upcoming topics. Just a reminder to everyone, I would like to do a Q&A episode at the end of the Washington series in order to give you a chance to ask any lingering questions you may have about Washington or his presidency. Right now, that episode is scheduled to come out in October. And yes, I refer to my Excel spreadsheet to see. But as I may need time to research answers to your questions, if you could try to get them in by mid-September, that would be great. I'll be sharing contact information in a minute so that you'll know how to get those questions to me. A few special thanks before I wrap up. First, a special thank you to the other person who works on both podcasts behind the scenes. Our audio editor, Andrew Fonco.
That's me.
I've been working with Andrew on the Harrison podcast for a few months now, and recently brought him on to work on presidencies, and couldn't be more pleased with the results. Not only does having him work on audio editing free up a great deal of my time, so I can focus on other tasks for the podcast, but the quality of the episodes has vastly improved over my amateur editing work. If you, like me, could use Andrew's able audio editing skills on your next project, reach out to him via email at andrew@foncook, that's PFANNKUCHE.com. Another person who is behind the scenes but still plays a large role in helping to shape the podcast. Indeed, without his moral support, neither podcast would likely have gotten off the ground, is my husband, Alex. as I've struggled to find my way creatively over the years. He has been a constant source of strength, inspiration, and encouragement. When I wanted to just throw in the towel, he motivated me to keep going until I found a project that fit me. Je crois que tu sois moi, et je suis toi. Je t'aime, mon mari. Finally, thank you to all of you. Some of you who are listening are friends I've known long before I started podcasting. Others, I've had the pleasure of meeting and getting to know since. Still others of you I don't know at all. However, no matter who you are or where you are my motivation for doing this. And I only hope that you've enjoyed the experience thus far, that you've learned something and are been entertained, and that you stick around to see what's next. Okay, now to the contact info. For folks listening to Presidencies who would like to submit Washington-related questions, or if you'd just like to say hi, I can be reached via email at presidenciespodcast, all one word, @gmail.com, on Facebook at facebook.com/presidencies, or on Twitter at presidencies89. Listeners to the Harrison Podcast who would like to get in touch with me, everything is Harrison Podcast, all one word. That's the handle on both Facebook and Twitter, and the email is at gmail.com. Thanks so much again for listening. Sayonara, shus, and take care, dear friends, wherever you are. Until next time.
History is the greatest adventure story. But does it ever leave you wondering what the women were doing all that time? This is Lori from the Her Half of History podcast, and the answer is that some women were seizing power, or escaping slavery, or spying for their country, or creating artistic masterpieces, while countless others were doing the laundry, getting married, and wondering why their clothes don't have more pockets. If you would like to hear the stories of women doing all of those things, check out Her Half of History at herhalfofhistory.com or wherever you get your podcasts.